outside of Spain. And yesterday's race saw a very dominant performance for the championship leader, Teofil Nol. Can he try and replicate that in races 2 and 3 today? Well, let's find out. Of course, Scott Woodward's here on commentary this weekend to guide you through all of the action. And as you can see, it's still warm, it's still sunny, and it's still dry, and it's still beautiful weather conditions over in Portugal, in Iberia, as we get set for racing to get underway. So as the action gets set to get underway very shortly, we can quickly recap on what happened yesterday at the very least. We can tell you that it was Teofil Nile who took victory yesterday as the cars start to make their way out of pit lane round to the grid for race number 2. Slight delay to this race getting underway as the action was slightly delayed in the classic race earlier on as they make their way out onto the circuit to set the grid. They had a second qualifying session this morning, and from that second qualifying session, you can see the track there, 4.182 kilometres in length, Estoril, of course, former Portuguese Grand Prix venue. In qualifying earlier on, it was a superb effort once again from Teofil Nol to put himself in fastest in qualifying, and that means that he will start from pole position. He has alongside him Enzo Deligny, the the first of the Campos racing drivers and the Red Bull backed driver as well. He'll start on the front row of the grid. Then it's Christian Ho and Matteo De Palo on the second row from MP Motorsports. Pedro Clara, the first of the MP Motorsport cars, starting in fifth. And then Andreas Cardenas, who had a fantastic battle with Pedro Clara at one point early on in the race. Those two going side by side for more than half a lap after a small mistake exiting turn 1 for Pedro Clara. Then on to row 4, we have Valerio Rinicella and Chiara Alzari with Ricardo Gracia and Valentin Cluse, who had a poor start yesterday, didn't even complete a lap after getting tagged at the Gancho chicane and got spun around and as a result had to retire on the spot. He'll start from 10th this time, hoping to make up a much better impact in P10. Then it's row 6 for Jesse Carrasquedo and Alex Ninovich, who started 12th yesterday and he's looking to try and pick up a couple more spots if he can. Row 7 sees Noah Strumstead and Federico Alrafai ahead of Fernando Barrichello, who is the brother of Eduardo Barrichello and, of course, the son of former F1 racer for Brawn, for Jordan, for Ferrari as well, of course, Rubens Barrichello. And then he's alongside Theodore Jensen, also in Santalok. Then it's Lynn Hodenius and Noah Lyle, who starts on the 10th row, just behind Geronimo Berrio and Juan Cota. And it's Pablo Sarrazin, son of Stefan Sarrazin, former F1 rally and sports car racer, and he is alongside Luciano Morano on the 11th row. Row 12 is the Japanese driver Hyu Yamakoshi, who got a very decent result yesterday. Finished inside the top 10, but he's got work to do starting all the way back in 23rd on the grid. And then he's got Alvise Rodella alongside for MP Motorsport. You can see a lot more of the cars coming out of pit lane around to the grid. Enzo Deligny at the front of that queue, you can see in the Red Bull liveried Campos machine. And the rest of the grids, we go through it quickly. It'll come up on the screen very shortly, but we've got Sebastian Murray for Santalok and Eric Genet for Technicar. His teammate Griffin Peebles will be on row 14, back on 27th on the grid. This massive grid of F4 cars alongside Flavio Oliveri. And it's Maximiliano Restrepo and Carl Bennett, the tyre driver. And then towards the back, we've got Georgi Zarowski and Kai Darianani for Kram Motorsport. Now, there are two drivers that are missing from that list, which is Alexander Abkajava and Isaac Barashi. They will start this race, but they will start it from pit lane. There's two particular reasons for that, because they've both been given pit lane starts for incidents in qualifying. So the reasons is that for Isaac Barashi, he was overtaking under the yellow flag. Because of that, he's been giving a pit lane start. As for Alexander Abkajava, who didn't even make it past more than one lap before being put out of the race. And that's for causing a collision and making an unrealistic move in qualifying, and he will start from the pit lane also. So there are still 34 starters. 32 of them will take to the grid. 2 of them will start at the end of pit lane. As the cars make their way around onto the grid, dummy grid before the race is getting underway, I can tell you compared to yesterday, the temperatures are certainly much better than they were. Still rather warm out there at Estoril, but it's not as warm as it was yesterday. Case in point, it was it's some 30 degrees out there, so ambient temperature is still quite warm, but the track temperature is much reduced than it was, mainly because I think times would have been better given that it was much cooler temperatures. Yesterday, track temperatures were nearing 50 degrees centigrade. And I suspect that 1 or 2 drivers who are more used to slightly cooler temperatures at some of the other circuits they visit, or in other series that they race in, or other circuits that they've been to at other times of the year, that they were struggling a little bit with some of the temperatures. And so because of that, other drivers were able to step up and make full advantage of that, whilst others really struggled to get their cars in the optimum range, particularly when it came to tyre pressures and temperatures. And just that can sometimes play a bit of havoc with the car setup on top of it as well. So slightly better temperatures. It's still very warm out there, of course, as you'd expect at this time of year still in the Iberian part of the world. As Teofil Nile brings his number 4 machine, the championship leader, onto pole position. He'll be looking to try and add to his win tally. He'll be going for win number 7 after this one. He's taken 6 victories, and that victory yesterday also helped him to extend his lead further in the championship. He comes into this race after yesterday's result with 224 points. He has a lead that's about 75 points ahead of second place Valerio Rinicella, who finished outside the top 5 for the first time since Aragon, because up to that point he finished on the podium 5 times, and that included a win at Navarro in race 3. But it's his first time since the second round at Aragon that he finished outside of the top 5. So 6th place for Rinicella, not quite where he wanted to be. But what it also provided was an opportunity for some of the drivers immediately behind him to start to grab points towards trying to close in for second place, particularly Enzo Deligny and Christian Ho, who had this great sort of almost tense battle between the two. There wasn't too much battling in terms of wheel-to-wheel overtaking, but they were nose to tail for the majority of the race. And they were trying to pick up one each other at some points as the race went on. There is Christian Ho, the Singapore driver, currently 4th in the points, and after yesterday's result, he is now 6 points behind Enzo Deligny. Deligny himself is only 8 behind Valerio Rinicella. That result really did help him launch himself a little bit higher up the order. Just seeing here, that's Matteo De Palo, who of course starts this race from 4th on the grid. And look at the Campos Racing cars. Campos Racing, of course, quite well established in single-seater ranks, particularly in junior single-seaters, particularly in Formula 2 and Formula 3, certainly spreading their wings a lot to try and pick as much of a talent pool as possible to pull forward amongst the junior single-seater ladder. And also, there's a teams championship to think about as well, which includes this team, MP Motorsports, and this is what their leading drivers. Pedro Claro, 5th in the championship, and his first top 5 finish since Navarro as well, because his last couple of races have not been satisfactory. At Estoril, it's quite a disappointing weekend. It didn't finish higher than 10th, and that included a 12th place and a 28th place finish, which really did hamper him in terms of points. Got back to the top 5 with 4th place yesterday, but he did have a bit of a mistake early on. He was battling with the Peruvian driver Andres Cardenas in the mix. You can see the grid once again. Nile and Deligny on the front row, Ho and De Palo on the second row, and Clara and Cardenas. And we'll go through that before we continue that story. So Clara and Cardenas looking to continue their battle from yesterday, where they went side by side for more than half a lap. And then Clara was able to kind of keep him in front, but he ended up being the cork in the bottle. He couldn't quite catch up to the cars in front. Rinicella and Alazari on row 4. And the rest of the grid scroll streaming through. Strumsted and Al Rafai on row 7. Barrichello and Jensen on row 8. Then it's Berrio and Kota on row 9. And rounding out the top 20, you've got Lynn Hedenius and Noah Lyle from Rowan Carlin. The Rowan Carlin guys have dropped off a little bit since the start of the season, but hopefully they can try and recover through the pack. Sarazan and Morano ahead of Yamakoshi and Alvise Rodella for row 12. They'll continue to scroll backwards for row 13 down to 15. Sebastian Murray and Eric Genet, Griffin Peebles and Flavio Oliveri, and Maximiliano Restrepo and Carl Bennett. And then the last row of the cars that will start at the start on the grid, which is Georgi Zarowski and Kai Darianani. As I mentioned, it is pit lane starts for Izuk Barashi and Alexander Abkajava. Izuk Barashi for causing overtaking the yellow flags, and Alexander Abkajava for causing a collision and also making an unrealistic move. So now the grid is clearing, and you can see that Teofil Nile is on the right-hand side in the dark blue and white number 4 machine for Santaloc Racing. Alongside him, the Red Bull liveried car of Red Bull Junior Enzo Deligny, the very talented young Frenchman, has had a fantastic karting career. Also gone straight into circuit racing, and it's amazing that you look at him and how he's progressed already at this quite tender age. He's only 15 years old. He's dual nationality. He's both French and Chinese, but he raced under a French nationality. But he's technically a dual citizen, I suppose. Only 15 years old, and certainly looking to make an instant impact in his single-seater career going forwards. Green flag in the air. We've got one car that's got away very slowly. It's one of the Santaloc cars that didn't go away quite well. I'm trying to work out exactly who that might have been towards the front. If I look at the grid, Santalok, who was around that sort of back plate. It might have been Theodore Jensen, I think, because he was starting back on row 8 on the right-hand side of the grid. So it looks like Theodore Jensen might have had a problem getting underway. But now the formation lap sees the drivers given one last chance to get some heat and pressures up into the tyres, and also to get some temperatures up into the brakes, because you want to get them into an optimal range in order to make sure that when you hit that pedal down towards turn 1 for the first time, you're not locking up or having the brakes go cold, or simply just putting your foot to the floor and having practically no braking ability at all, not as much as you'd like. And ironically, as I mentioned yesterday, they're weaving from side to side, but given that it is quite warm out there, you don't quite need it. And the track temperature's risen ever so slightly. It's 38 degrees. It's not as high as the 48, 49 degrees we had yesterday, but it's still quite warm out there. And I probably would anticipate, as the day goes on this afternoon in Portugal, that track temperature will start to continue to rise. Both races were quite late in the afternoon, so somewhere around about sort of 3 o'clock in the afternoon onwards. So I imagine at that point we've still got a few hours to go, that the temperatures may well go up if they are going to continue to go up that way. So let's just remind then of where we are with points as I was talking through them then. Teofil Nile with 224 points after yesterday. He has a 75-point advantage over... 65 point advantage, I think it is. I'll work it out. 75 is 75-point advantage. I'll work it out eventually. I was never that good at maths. Anyway, 75 points between Teofil Nile and Valerio Renicella. And then, because of Renicella's 6th place yesterday and the podium finishes for Enzo Deligny and Christian Ho, it means that Renicella comes into this second race on 149 points, but only 8 ahead of Enzo Deligny in third on 141. And then it's Christian Ho, the Singapore driver, on 135. Pedro Clero rounds out the top 5 on 121. And then the rest of the top 10 is Matteo De Palo with his 7th place yesterday, now only a point ahead of Noah Strumstedt. He's now managed to leapfrog him into 6th. Strumstedt finished the first time outside the top 10 since the start of the season for every race that he's finished, because up until then his worst result had been 9th place, and that was in the last race at Jerez. So his form's dropped off a tiny bit in recent couple of races, but hopefully he can try and pick his way up the order. Didn't quite qualify where he wanted to in qualifying this morning. Has to try and battle his way through if he can from deep in the pack. Keanu Al-Azari, who also finished 14th yesterday, is one of his worst results of the season. Andres Cardenas is now into 9th. They're rounding up the top 10 is the Colombian Geronimo Berrio. 38% humidity, 30 degrees air temperature, 38 degrees track temperature. It is still quite a warm one as the cars make their way onto the grid in 2x2 formations. Teofil Nile, championship lead, looking for his 7th win of the season, starting on the right-hand side in the Santalok blue and white machine. Watch for Enzo Deligny, slightly pointing his car to the inside. Red Bull livery car for Campos. One car heading to the pit lane in the background. Not quite catch who that is, but we'll have to wait and see. In fact, there's that one car has simply expired. And that is... It was a single-digit car, is all I can really tell you. So it looks like it's going to be a delayed start, I imagine, because they're going to have to clear that car from the end of pit lane. It looks like that car simply just overheated. So I'm trying to work out exactly who that is. Either that's possibly one. I think it's one of the DriveX cars that's had a problem. But no, they're going to get the race underway, I think. So green flag at the back. I was expecting there's going to be a delayed start, but perhaps not. The 25 minutes plus 1 lap. The red lights are on. No, extra formation lap. That's it. I did wonder with the green flag at the back if there was going to be a complete race start, but no, they are going for an extra formation lap, so it allows the marshals to recover the car which came off. Now I'm going to try and work out exactly who that was, because it looked like possibly one of the DriveX cars may have been Georgi Zaravsky, because that was right at the back of the grid. So Georgi Zaravsky was right at the rear of the cars that were starting on the grid. Remember, we have got Alexander Abkajava and Izit Barashi starting from pit lane. Now, I reckon that's possibly... Can't quite see the number from here, but it looked like it was a single-digit number. So for me, that looks like a DriveX car, and it is, in fact, possibly Georgi Zaravsky. So the marshals with fire extinguishers quickly onto the scene. And that car will have to be hopefully pushed away as soon as possible. The extra formation, that gives them another chance to continue to get the tyre pressures and temperatures up into the optimal ranges. Should also mention that there is also on top of this, there is the Teams Championship. MP Motorsport leads that. I mean, both MP Motorsport and Campos have 2 teams effectively in this championship. They've got the main, essentially their main team, and then like a sub team which allows them to try and score a few more points. As we see here, more recovery going on for the car that got stranded. And it is one of the DriveX cars, and I think it might well be, because it was single digits, it suggests it is Georgi Zurawski. So sadly, the driver from Macedonia, I believe that is. I was never that good with flags either. So, no, Kyrgyzstan. My apologies to Georgie. The Kyrgyzstan driver having one of the mechanical issues. It's not often that you see that happen with these F4 cars, being all to the same spec. It's not often you see many with mechanical issues, but it might well be that his car he wasn't able to manage the temperatures in his car as well as anyone else's, and therefore that car has really let him down when he wanted to perform at its fastest most. You can see some very extreme weaving going on here, some very extreme burnouts to get lots of heat into the tyres, and sometimes that can be risky. You don't want to drop it on the way to the grid, but makes the likes of Teofil Nile and Enzo Deligny have got this down to an art almost. Teofil Nile, very extreme tyre warming and burnout technique. Another car's to pit lane. I think that might be one of the Rodin Carling cars coming in. That might be either Noah Lyle or maybe Alex Ninovich, one of the two. If we've got a car missing, that might explain it. We'll wait and see if it is his car missing on the grid. No, actually, Ninovich is there in the background, I think. Was that Noah Lyle? He might be one of the Rodin Carling cars that comes to the pit lane, but we'll work it out possibly on the timing screen when we see who doesn't come round. Usually the tech game I like to play there is spot the car that goes tumbling down the timing screen. So we'll see if that does happen. I can see there, yeah, Noah Lyle's definitely there. He's lined up. Ninovich, I think, was also there too, starting from 12th on the grid. But the last few cars start to move the way into position. Race has been slightly shortened. It's now 23 minutes plus 1 lap because of the extra formation lap. And it's slightly reduced points in this race. You get 18 points for a win, 15 for second, and 12 for third. It's the same points as basically winning for a 30-minute race, but you knock off for 25 points. And essentially, it's points down to 9th with a point for fastest lap also. Last few cars getting into position then, and let's try take 2 at the start then. So race 2 of the weekend here for the F4 Spanish Championship at Estoril set to get underway. Teofil Nile championship leader looking for his 7th win of the season and a 2nd win of the weekend. The lights are out and we're racing a Spanish F4 at Estoril. It's a strong start for Teofil Nile. A couple of cars didn't get away properly from the line as we head down towards turn 1 for the first time. It's one of the MP Motorsport cars that struggled to get away, but down towards turn 1 for the first time, and Nile leads it. It's Deligny in 2nd place. The Campus cars are in the mix. There's contact. Round up to 55 machine. One of the MP Motorsport cars. Rinicella, 2nd in the championship. Valerio Rinicella in trouble already. He was sick yesterday and lost points. Now he's down to the back of the field. More battles going on. Looks like Pedro Clara getting involved with one of the Campos cars in the mix. I think that was Matteo De Palo who's having a scrap with. And also in there too appears to be, I think that's possibly in there too as well as 14. That is the 14 car of Keanu Alazari with a better start. The driver didn't get away. It's 66. And that is Geronimo Berrios. So sadly, the Colombian driver with problems stalling on the grid. He's going to try and get pushed away. If not, that's his race premature over. Side by side, wheel to wheel. He's down the outside. That's Pedro Clara, the Brazilian, getting squeezed out wide on the exit by Alcazari and almost gets his nose chopped off as they come through. It's a strong start also by the looks of it from Alex Ninovich. He started back in 12th on the grid, up 5 places to 7th. So a great start for the Australian. Has become up towards the complex for the first time, up towards the Gancho chicane, and Nile leads it from Deligny then. It's Ho in 3rd place, the same top 3 as it was yesterday, but DePalo's made a great start up to 4th. Alcazari equally up to 5th. Claro's been shuffled down a couple of places to 6th, and an excellent getaway from Ninovich puts him to 7th. Cardenas has also dropped back to 8th, and a much better opening lap also for Valentin Cluse. He hasn't been tangled up in that chicane on the first lap this time, and he's in the top 10 in 9th, ahead of Gracia in 10th. So a slightly all-action start then to this second Spanish F4 race of the weekend at Estoril as they charge down the pit straight to end lap number 1. It's Nile in the lead by 6/10 of a second as we see here some more dueling going on. Looks like that is Gracia on the inside of, that is actually Al Rafai on the inside of Strumstead. Lots more overtaking going on here. 3 abreast in pack as well. Trying to sort themselves out 2 here. Almost got away with it by the looks of it. Turn the way now through curve 2 and in towards Lamy for the 2nd time. There's a car spinning in the background. I couldn't quite catch exactly who it was, but there was one car in the mid-pack that lost it on the exit of curve 2. So one car that sideways in the middle of the road is what another couple of cars getting squeezed out wide. That was possible. I think that was Al Rafai, and it's 85 that's gone around. Another one of the DriveX machines. And that is 85 Wankota that's had the spin. So he was the car that went sideways. Either he stalled the car or trying to refire it. And that car in the middle of the road, if he can't get that cleared, it will have to be a safety car. Also, I think it's got it going. I think looks like it's Valentine has got going. I think number 3 is in the pit lane also. And 3 is Jesse Carrasquedo Jr., one of the Campos racing cars. Young Mexican also hitting problems. So a few drivers hitting dramas for various reasons. And as expected, safety car has been deployed because it looks as though that Wankota cannot get the DriveX machine back underway. And so I think the safety car has slightly caught everyone out because everyone is completely stacked up behind the Kia safety car. Everyone thankfully has seen it. They're all just trying to figure out their order in the train before they fall into formation. Teofil Nile then, after a slightly energetic lap and a half in this second Spanish F4 race, now gets a chance to have a bit of respite. What it does mean also is that Enzo De Ligny and Christian Ho get to keep him in his sights. Remember yesterday, Nile had quite a substantial lead yesterday, and he was able to pull away quite quickly, whilst both De Ligny and Ho had to try and follow in his wheel tracks whilst they battle amongst each other. Let's give us a slight chance to take stock of where we are after 2 laps, as the pack once again weaves from side to side to keep those tyre temperatures and pressures up. And so after 2 laps, it is Teofil Nile that leads the way then, from Enzo De Ligny in second place. Christian Ho is third. Mattia De Palo has the fastest lap of the race currently in fourth, but I imagine once we get to proper racing speeds, it will be somebody else. But if you haven't completed the proper flying lap, that counts as the fastest lap. There is number 8 of Mattia De Palo in the mix. Enzo De Ligny also leads the rookie category from De Palo and Alcazari. And Alazari doing a much better job this time in P5. Pedro Claro down to 6th. Minovic up 7th. He's one of the big movers from that start of the race. Valentin Klus is up to 8th. Cardenas is 9th. And Noah Strumstead rounds out the top 10. Strumstead looking to try and get back into a top 10 finish after he missed out yesterday, finishing in 12th. So all sorts going on at that start of that race. And one car having an overheating issue before the race even got going. Here's the replay of the start. So let's just take a look at see exactly what happened. So Nile on the outside of the blue and white car. The Campos cars are fanning out all over each other. We've got Christian Ho and Mattia De Palo in the mix. And then the contact there says Rinicella round. And round goes the man in second place of the championship. This was further back. That was Pedro Claro trying to get up the inside. 2 cars also went skating through the gravel in the background. Exiting Curva 2. Couldn't quite catch who they were. And I think in the back, this is Wankota. Simply just ran wide and did it all by himself. And I think he also got distracted by a car in front because there was also a car just 3 or 4 places ahead of him that also got caught up as well. And that's Jesse Carrasquedo's car being pushed back into the garage. So you can't say it was a dull start to that second race. And that's when they got things cleared up. The safety car, as if by magic, is in this lap. And I imagine that Enzo De Ligny is going to be quite on his toes here to try and watch exactly what Teofil Nile decides to try and do here. Nile hoping to get a strong restart. Starts to punch the pack up here. And he becomes the safety car now. He decides when to pull the pin and get this race back underway. Just moving him side to side, trying to be a bit deceptive. When's he going to go? He has to pull the pin and push the throttle sometime. Now he goes for it. Straightens up. Exits out of the S's and through the parabolic Ayrton Senna to complete lap number 3 and get racing back underway under green flag conditions. Onto the pit straight they come then. And Nile then has got a decent restart, but De Ligny has gone with him. The 2 Campos cars in 3rd and 4th are nose to tail. We've got Ho and De Palo also in there. You've got a scrap for 5th brewing between on the restart, Alazari and Claro. And there's Alazari going defensive because he knows that Claro will go. And here comes Claro with a big dive up the inside. Huge move up the inside for 5th. Can he get it stopped? The answer is just about. But now Alazari runs out wide. And that really put Alazari off. Claro with a huge dive. He passes to the inside line. Really put Alazari off. But somehow they both managed to get the car stopped and they hold station in 5th and 6th. That was ambitious. Claro getting pretty impatient on the restart, trying to get himself back in front and battling with the 4 cars ahead of them. Minovic is in 7th place. We've got Klus in 8th, Cardenas in 9th, and Strumstead rounding out the top 10 on the restart. And a decent move also for Noah Lyle. He's come up a few places too. He's up to 14th after not a great qualifying. As for Rinicella, after his first lap spin, he's up to 23rd behind Fernando Barrichello. He's got some more work still on this restart to pick his way through the pack. And this will certainly be a hamper to his championship chances, given that he'll be dropping more valuable points for the outside the points, in fact. He won't score anything because you only get points down to 9th in this 25-minute race. So he will actually score nothing, whereas Teofil Nile, if he stays where he is, he'll score 18 points. Plus, if he takes the fastest lap, that's a bonus one on top of that too. Through the grassy chicane, side by side. That was Noah Lyle, I think, going side by side with Theodore Jensen. Had some antics yesterday, which saw him out a little bit. But there might be Yamakoshi, actually, he was battling with there. Yeah, I think it was Nile and Yamakoshi, because Yamakoshi was looking up the inside line. Yamakoshi had a great race yesterday. Of course, he came 8th, which was one of his personal best results for the season. That was best than 9th. As the pack now makes its way back down towards turn 1 on the pit straight. Side by side again for 5th, as Clever this time tries the outside line on Al-Azari. He goes for it this time, sweeps back around the outside, big right. He's shoving out wide this time at this point. Now I'm going to squeeze my way through, and he does make it through. So Pedro Clever up to 5th, past Yarda Al-Azari. Twitch there also for Alex Ninovic. He's trying to get himself into the mix in the leading Rodin Carlin car. Only 3 of those in the pack. You've also got Noah Lyle and Federica Al-Rafai. Al-Rafai 12th, Noah Lyle 14th. All 3 of the Rodin cars are in the top 15 at this point. And one car, as I say that's Noah Lyle that's gone around up at Larby Corner. Now the big question is, did he jump or was he pushed? Because that looks like he either went in way too hot or he tangled with somebody and got spun round. Either way, he's right towards the rear of the field and got a lot of work to do. Talk about curse of the commentator. Anyway, back towards the front. And this time, it is Nile versus Deligny. This is the replay of Pedro Clever diving down the outside. And Al-Azari, all he could do was hold his regular racing line and just got squeezed a little bit to the inside, given that Clever was fully alongside him. And there's the answer. Noah Lyle did it all by himself. He was battling there with Yamakoshi and a huge bunch of cars behind. Looked as though the pressure just got to him, and round it went. So, 13.5 minutes plus 1 lap to go. Still Al-Azari there ahead of Alex Ninovic. So, looks as though after a strong start for the UAE driver, he's now got the Australian Ninovic all over his rear end as we come onto the pit straight once again. And now it's a chance for the Carlin man to possibly have a look at making a pass here. At the front, it's still Nile from Deligny from Ho in the top 3. DePallo and Clero round out the top 5, but this is the scrap for 6th. Alex Ninovic will sense an opportunity here. And here he goes. The Australian makes the dive up the inside. And for the second time in as many laps, well, it was the second time in 3 laps that Al-Azari's gone wide and kept the position. I'm not quite sure if race control will be happy with that. But then again, you might argue the case for the Force there, because Ninovic diving up the inside line. We've also now got the 75 and Noah Strumstead in there too now in 8th position. Valentin Cruz is there in 9th. And also up in the top 10 is Andres Cardenas, and that was for the man who was battling with Pedro Clever yesterday over 4th position. My side, this is now Ninovic under from Strumstead. He gets put onto the grass and puts 2 wheels over the curb. Ninovic is not interested in defending the position. And like attacking in front, lock up from the Rodin man, but the Australian trying to hold on to the position as they turn out of the parabolic interior. Now up at the front, I can see that Deligny is not letting Teofil Nile get away. He's actually keeping pretty close this time. And unlike yesterday, when he didn't seem to quite have the pace to keep up with him, it was always a couple of seconds gap in front. This time, Teofil Nile will put under a bit more pressure in this second race. Through the uphill chicane at Gancho goes Al-Azari from Ninovic. The Campos squad watch on as their cars currently sit at the moment in 2nd, 3rd, 4th. And also in there, we've got 8th and 10th, so 5 Campos cars in the top 10. I know what they're doing, Campos. They certainly are getting the most out of this weekend so far, and their cars really are performing well. Down the pit straight once again. This is on to lap 7, still 11.5 minutes to go, plus 1 lap. Remember, when the timer hits 0, the lap that they're on, when they cross the line, they'll start one more. As this time, it's a battle for position between 61 and 18. So Valentin Cruz was the one diving to the inside to defend from Andres Cardenas. Andres, who is one of the proteges of none other than 2-time #1 world champion Fernando Alonso, as part of his A4 team management stable. And certainly trying to make the most of the opportunity he's got in Spanish F4 this weekend. Make the way out of the Curva VIP. And the gap still hasn't come down very much more. It's still 0.4 of a second between Nile and Deligny at this point. Ho remaining in 3rd. And then DePallo and Clero rounding out the top 5. Al-Azari and Ninovic in 6th and 7th. Then Strumstead, Post and Cardenas. The top 10. For the rookie ranks, it's still Deligny who leads that particular race, from DePallo in 2nd. then Al-Azari, Ninovic and Cardenas. Rafai, sixth in rookie from Hodenius, Peebles, Rodella and Oliveri. There, 85 coming back out of Mankota. He's recovered after his spin, so he's obviously got the car going again, but he's trundling down the pit lane. He's firmly down by a couple of laps and out of contention. He's got some work to do. He firmly won't be scoring points today. These two very much right. Just also noticed that Valerio Renicella, after his first lap spin, is up 6 more places after the restart. Last time I saw him in the order, he was 23rd. He's now up to 17th. And his next target is Alvise Rodella. Alvise, who is another of the MP Motorsport drivers. He's got some more work to do, so that'll be him trying to pick off his teammate very shortly. Picking off, it might be Deligny picking off Niall for a second here. Deligny sets the doesn't set the fastest lap of the race, because that accolade has actually gone to Christian Ho, and he's only about 8 tenths away from Deligny at this point. And Ho's also got to watch out, because it's also bringing in Matteo Di Pallo, the Italian driver, into the contest. Matteo 6th in the overall points and 2nd in rookie. Hoping to try and close in a little bit more here. There's a bit of a stalemate between the top 5 at the moment. These cooler temperatures are certainly helping. The track temperature's gone up ever so slightly, up to 39 degrees now. Second sector times coming in. Top 4 are practically all together on 26.1 in the second sector. They're very evenly matched. No real change in the order in the gaps between these 5 cars. Pedro Claro's joining in here, just latching himself onto the tail of the top 5. And 6th place, you can still see that Al-Azari is not that far away by a couple of seconds. Hoping to try and hold off the cars behind. He's just pulling away slightly from Noah Strumstead, who's up to 7th now. He's feeling a bit more comfortable in these slightly cooler temperatures on track. Still not necessarily cool, because it's still 39 degrees on track, but cooler than it was yesterday. It was about 10 degrees higher, which certainly didn't really serve some drivers all that well. Others managed to cope just fine. There you see Alex Ninovic, who is into 8th position, the Australian driver. And Alex is had personal best result so far this season of 5th. That was right at the beginning of the season at Spa. Ever since then, he's only finished in the top 10 3 more times. That was all at Navarro. A very good weekend there with, by his standards, which was 2 8th places and a 7th. He hasn't finished higher than 8th position since he left Jerez, left Navarro, because at Jerez yesterday, last weekend, he was 14th, 29th, and then retired. And then in race 1 yesterday, he was in the top 10. So Ninovic into 8th, and looking to try and match one of his best results of the season if he can. He has got a very feisty Valentin Klus, who's having a much better race than yesterday. Didn't even make it past 1 lap when he got tangled up at the Gancho chicane. And that put him out on the spot. So Klus having a much finer time of it today. There's Andres Cardenas, who is not quite having a scrap with Pedro Claro than he was yesterday, but still keeping close in P10. And he's done well to break into the top 10 in points, given that he didn't compete at the opening rounds at Spa. So the results he has scored, including a victory in race 2 at Jerez, certainly helped him to rise up the order very well. Good to see that the Fernando Alonso protege is doing quite a good job so far, even though he hasn't completed the full season, especially in the opening round. So he's now on the tail of this 3-car battle that's been identified for 8th between Ninovic, Klus and himself. Making their way out of the Parabolica Ayet and Senna, named after the great 3-time world champion himself. He took his first ever victory in Formula 1 here back in 1985 for Lotus in appalling wet weather conditions. Thankfully, we're far from appalling weather conditions here. It's beautiful skies and warm, typical Iberian sunshine. And this top 5 has stayed pretty static. It's this scrap we're looking at here from 8th place downwards that's starting to back up a little bit. You've got Alex Ninovic in the black and white Rodan Carlin car. See here, this is to the head. Noah Strumstead chasing down Keanu Al-Azari. That 8th place battle is now between 5 cars, effectively. It's between Ninovic, Rodan Carlin, Valentin Klus for MP Motorsport. You've got Cardenas, and then you've got the Ricardo Gracia, the Brazilian driver, in 11th, and then Federico Al-Rafai in 12th, and that's over the final top 10 spots. Biggest mover in the field, actually, is number 36, back in 21st position. There always is a big lock-up from Noah Strumstead. He was challenging onto the rear of Keanu Al-Azari. And Noah Strumstead couldn't quite get that. He just about got it stopped, but he is putting the UAE driver under pressure here as they turn in through the right-hander up at Aurelia. Back into the Scancho chicane. They are on the full Grand Prix circuit. If it was a slightly more shorter circuit, they would continue upwards towards the fast right-hander at Pancake. And then back around to the S's, but they are just slowly passed down a little bit through this chicane that was brought in around about sort of 93, 94 time. Now, black flag for car 66, and that is for external help in the start, and that's Geronimo Berrio. That would have been, I think, for Geronimo Berrio being pushed away from the grid after he stalled. So, unfortunately for the Colombian, his slightly disastrous race has gotten even more disastrous, I'm afraid, for him by his start. Because after stalling, he's now been given a penalty for getting a push start to help him get back underway again. And he deals with that far down the order. We still continue to watch the scrap that goes on for 6th position between Al-Azhari and Strumstead, just wide over the curb. You've got to be careful that you don't transgress over those curbs too much, because there were a few drivers yesterday that did get track limits penalties. And the track limits penalties are not severe, it's ones that can give you quite a bit. 66, which is Geronimo Berrio. The time is up, I'm afraid. Black flag signals, race over. So the Colombian will be pushed back into the pit lane. Meanwhile, Al-Azhari now has been, I think, he's been right. Al-Azhari's been passed by Strumstead, and now he's under big pressure from both Ninovic and Valentin Klus. Ninovic looks round the outside with Australian locks up as they go into the interior hairpin. And now look at that, the lockup has only cost him another place because Valentin Klus has come up the inside and got him through into what is now 8th position. And Al-Azhari now is under really big pressure here. Whatever happened off camera there between Strumstead and Al-Azhari has got the UAE driver in all sorts of drama here, because he's now got a massive stack of 5 cars just lining up behind him, trying to pick him off one by one. Al-Azhari under huge pressure here as they come into the Gancho chicane. As they come back into view here, it's still Klus that's managed to pick up that position. So Klus is up to 8th. Ninovic is now 9th, and also in there too, of course, is Cardenas, Gracia, and Al Rafai. This is now scrapped for 7th out of 12th as the 6-pack makes its way out of the Parabolica Ayrton Senna and back onto the pit straight once again. And now that after that little wobble for Al-Azhari, he's now got himself a little more back up to speed. And Valentin Klus will smell blood in the water here. He knows that Ninovic tried to get through. Behind them, there's more battles going on here. This is between the two cars at the back of that queue. This is Gracia and Al Rafai that's going to have a scrap here. And losing another place there is Ninovic to Cardenas. He comes back at him on the exit through curve 1. Looks to try to get the inside for curve 2. Does it work? And the answer is maybe. He looks down the outside. Yes, he has, in fact. He has squeezed through. So I wasn't sure if he was still on the outside line, if he'd done the switchback. But in fact, it has been a move successful for Cardenas. But for Ninovic, he has successfully defended from Cardenas. And so that means Ninovic stays 9th, but he's the one that's falling back down the order now. He was the one that was charging up to as high as 7th or 8th. Now the mistake by Al-Azhari has put him under big pressure, and that lockup is all down here at this corner here, the interior hairpin, which is what started off that poor lap for him that's cost him a couple of spots. He's lost ground to both Al-Azhari and Valentin Klus. Klus, I think, should be happy to finish after not even making it one lap yesterday. So Valentin doing a grand job to hold on to currently 8th position. Just checking in with the cars out in front, Teofil Nile has now got the gap out to just about 9/10 of a second. But despite the early pressure on the restart from Enzo De Ligny, Nile has been able to hold off on that one and just managed to extend the gap ever so slightly. It's still Christian Ho 6/10 back in 3rd place, and another 6 or 7/10 back is Mattia De Palo. And Pedro Clara is now the 2nd back in P5. But this is the battle we need to watch out for, of course. This is Noah Strumstead. In fact, now he's actually broken away. Look at the gap he's pulled on Al-Azhari in just a couple of laps. He's got the fastest lap of the race onto the penultimate lap, because when we cross the line next time by, it won't be the checkered flag, even by the time it hits 0. Plus 1 lap means we go one more lap after the time it runs out. Al-Azhari has done a 39.7 in these conditions, but the fastest lap of the race is held by Noah Strumstead. He's trying to bring that gap down. He's matched De Palo and Clero in the first sector with a 19.8. As you can see, the leaders back together here on this penultimate lap. There's Pedro Clero. There's Noah Strumstead in 6th position. He's now really trying to close in. He's got a gap of 2 seconds to try and make up on Clero in front. As the leaders make their way down towards the interior hairpin for the second to last time, Teofil Nile for Scantalot Racing is potentially on course for win number 7 of the season. But he still has to negotiate this lap and one more and try and hold off the 4 cars behind. Rodinha looks on course for another podium finish, and it may well turn out to be a carbon copy of yesterday's first race, but it might not have been as simple as just saying it was exactly the same 3 cars, because we had the safety car restart early. Rodinha did put Niall under pressure, trying to force a mistake, but this young Frenchman, who can also claim Spanish nationality as well. In fact, I believe he is running under Spanish nationality this weekend, so the young sort of French Spaniard, we'll call him, is putting in a fine performance, and he's not that shakeable in terms of pressure, it seems, because Niall has managed to continue to hold off the advances of anyone else from behind him. Final lap then in race number 2 of Spanish F4 at Estoril. And race 2 about to be written into the books, but which order is it going to be? Because here, the Class 69s were given a 2-second time limit track penalty. 69 is Maximiliano Restrepo, so what's been quite a tricky race on several fronts for Drivets. Getting trickier after the track limit penalties. Turn away out of Lamy Corner for the last time. And let's see if there's going to be any possible last-minute dives or moves here. There's Pedro Claro. He might well be happy just getting another top 5 finish. Of course, he was 4th yesterday. He can add to another 5. It'll be, if he finishes where he is, it'll be his 5th top 5 finish outside of podiums and wins. He wins to his name also, this Pedro. That was right at the beginning of the year at Spa, and a 2nd place. Those are his best results of the year. So the non-Spanish rounds have been certainly kind to him in terms of being away from the Spanish circuit. As Enzo Dell'Igna turns his way out now of the right-hander Aurelia and up towards the Gancho chicane. All he can do now is keep Christian Ho at bay whilst trying to push and hope that Teofil Nol makes a mistake, but it looks as though it's all clean and tidy for the Spaniard as he makes his way now up towards the S's for the final time. We had early pressure after the early safety car restart, but this man just cannot stop winning. He's on for his 7th win of the season. This man certainly is putting himself into prime position to take the championship towards the season end. Up to the checkered flag. It is still a perfect 100% record from Estoril so far. Teofil Nol weaves with delight as he heads the checkered flag and takes victory in race 2 in Spanish F4 at Estoril with another superb performance, but he pushed a little bit harder this time by Enzo Dell'Igna in 2nd place and Christian Ho in 3rd. It's a carbon copy of yesterday's podium. 4th place goes to Mathieu de Pallo, 5th to Pedro Claro, 6th and the fastest lap of the race goes to Noah Strumstead, much better than yesterday. Then Tiana Aldazari, Valentin Cruz, Alex Nidovic and Andres Cardenas complete the top 10. The rest of the pack comes streaming through to take the flag. Well, the question's got to be, is there any stopping this man? Teofil Nol certainly proving himself to be the class of the field. It wasn't all easy, but he still at least gets the applause from the marshals around the circuit. And his target now will be to secure the hat-trick later on this afternoon. One more race coming up today, and I'm certain that he will want to try and pick up a victory if he can. He complete the hat-trick and will be 8th for the season, and to further put that championship lead out of reach. And the big result also is that Rinicella didn't score points either. That's really been a disastrous weekend, disastrous race for Dell'Igna in terms of scoring. No points scored for Rinicella. 25 points scored for Teofil Nol. That will further extend his lead, and I'm almost certain that on top of that, sorry, give me 18 points, not 25, because it was a 25-minute race. I should have remembered that, but I'm being stupid. Anyway, so 18 points, I should say, for Teofil Nol. I'll get that right. And it's no points for Rinicella. That's another 18 points gained on him, and I'm certain almost that with Dell'Igna's 15 points, it will help him leapfrog Rinicella into 2nd place in the championship with that result. Christian Ho picked up 12 points, and it will keep him in 4th. He'll be very close to Rinicella. That should put him now to 147. So he'll only be 2 points behind on my mental calculations. And Pedro Claro also with his P5. That will give him 8 points, and he'll put him on 129, but it will keep him 5th. Mathieu de Pallo was also, I believe, De Pallo was also 4th, which means he picks up 10 points. And de Pallo will go to 107. And Strumsted's P6 will give him 6 points. And they'll put him into double figures on 102 is what it'll put him. Up to the top 3 boards come our top 3 finishers. Same as yesterday, but it wasn't quite the same story. Teofil Nol didn't get away that much. His winning goal margin was about a couple of seconds yesterday, only less than a second today. But doesn't matter if it's 2 seconds or a few tenths. Victory is a victory. And it's win number 7 of the season for Teofil Nol and Santalot Racing. These guys really are taking to single-seaters pretty quickly. We talked about yesterday that they are started essentially is a GT team, but they really have come on strong when it comes to single-seaters, and they're proving their worth, particularly in Spanish F4. And it's hugs and congratulations all round for the team. A fine job so far this weekend. They would dearly love to end the weekend with a hat-trick. He hasn't yet taken all 3 victories in a weekend. He took 2 victories at Navarro and 2 victories at Jerez last time out last weekend. He really is making a charge for the championship. He only picked up 2 podiums from the first 5 races. And then ever since that 3rd race at Aragon, now so far, he has only failed to win the last, from the last 9 races, he's only failed to win twice. So it looks as though that Teofil Nol has really stepped up in this from the initial slightly decent start. He was always in the top 10 a little bit, got a 3rd at Spa, and then a 5th at Aragon, and a 3rd at Aragon, but then that last race will take victory. You see here, this is a bit further back, some of the race that was going on. Now, this was, I think, what happened to Al-Azhari, because he was battling away with Strumstead. This is further back, I think. That was Geronimo Berrio who was getting the push start to get underway, and that's what gave him the black flag after he stalled on the grid. Then this mid-race battle that was going on here between a few other drivers in the mix. That was DePalo who was under pressure there. You see, that was the spin for Juan Cota. That was Carrasquedo, who was being pushed back into the pit lane after his dramas, so he was out of the race, sadly. A few more highlights from that second race. This was the big guy from Pedro Clara, which didn't eventually see him get past this time, but a bold move as Al-Azhari went round the outside, ran wide on the exit and held on to the place. So Clara decided, right, I can't get through on the inside line, I'll try the outside this time, right? And he managed to make it stick, had the grip on the outside line. He forced Al-Azhari to take the tighter line into turn 1, and through he went. That was the move done. That was Noah Lyle's race coming to not a premature end, but certainly quite a nosedive pretty quickly as he spun, getting onto the dirty part of the circuit outside Lamy corner as well. So that was a slightly more action-packed race than yesterday. Yesterday was slightly more straightforward. A couple of incidents in the beginning, but a little more congested in that race. A little more action-packed than yesterday's race in that sense. Here's the result from race number 2. Teofil Nol with his 7th win of the season ahead of Enzo de Ligne and Christian Ho, the same podium from yesterday. It's DePalo and Clero in the top 5, Strumstead in 6th, and Al-Azhari, Klus, Nenevich and Cardenas rounding out the top 10 for Campos Racing. 11th place goes to the Brazilian Ricardo Gracia. That was from 11th place for Al Rafai. And then some strong results from many of those in the top 10. Definitely strong points towards the championship, but they still can't stop Teofil Nol. Ricardo Gracia, 11th from Federico Al Rafai. Then it's Theodore Jensen and Valerio Redicella. No points from that race after his first lap collision. He'll have to really try and pick his way through from deep in the pack in race number 3. Len Herdenius and Elviso Rodella in 16th place. And scrolling through to the rest of the top 20 and beyond. Fernando Barrichello was 21st. And Alexander Abkajaba from the pit lane up to 22nd. Good strong run from him. Nizit Barashi 30th from the pit lane. So he managed to make up some laps there eventually. And he lost, of course, Geronimo Berrio after he was black flagged after getting a push start. He also lost Carrasquedo with an issue in the pit lane after he pitted after just at the end of lap number 2. And then we also lost, I just confirmed it was Georgi Zarawski who had the car with the issue previously that forced him to miss the start. This is what happened between 26 and 4. This was between Nenevich and Al-Azhari. Al-Azhari running out wide. And then you see here, Al-Azhari, when he was trying to just hold off Nenevich and the cars behind. This is also slightly further back, so side-by-side action here. 2 of the DriveX cars involved. But this man, Teofil Nol, once again controlling the lead out in front, controlling the pace and holding on. There was a good battle there between Al-Azhari and the 75 machine for Campos of Noah Strumstead. Initially, Nenevich was having that great battle also with the 61 of Valentin Klus. And this big 3-way battle here. After the mistake for Al-Azhari, Nenevich tried to go diving down the outside. Just couldn't make it stick. And because he ran way out wide at the interior hairpin, that cost him positions. This is further back. And one of the Santalot cars getting involved there too. That would have been Luciano Morano in the mix. 36-7 there. Morano having a scrap with the 36 machine of the Cram Motorsport car, which is Kai Darianani. The podium presentation is underway here for Spanish F4. 3rd place, of course, to Christian Ho from Singapore. 2nd to Enzo de Ligne from France. But now, Spaniard with his 7th win of the season is Teofil Nol for Santalot Racing. He continues to extend his championship lead. Of course, the team representative for Santalot also equally happy with the victory, of course. And they will now be presented their podium trophies. So 3rd place goes, of course, to Christian Ho. Picked up his bronze trophy, holds it aloft. That will be certainly good points for him. It's also good points as well for Christian Enzo de Ligny, of course, that should move him up into second place with that result after Winnicella fell to score. But of course, that lead will now extend by a further 18 points for this man. Teofil Nile picks up another golden trophy to put into his collection. Very delighted with that. And as they stand on top of the podium, it's going to be pictures and also the winner's trophy for the winning team, Santalok Racing. As they stand on the podium, they will remove their hats very shortly after the picture's taken and play the national anthem of Spain. The national anthem rings out for the race winner, Teofil Nile, his 7th win of the season in Spanish F4. Can he make it 8 and further extend his lead? You can join us for more Spanish F4 action with race 3 coming up later on this afternoon, with more of us here at Estoril for the time being. But thanks for watching race 2 here in Portugal. For myself, Scott Woodward, and all of us here in Spanish F4, we'll see you for race 3 later on this afternoon. Bye for now.